Wem Dominator MK3, and this is volume 3. So this is the third Dominator that I've had in stock that's been sat waiting really to be restored. This one isn't in quite as good condition as the others, so let's just have a look. Let's just go into so you can see on the grill cloth there's a bit of a hole in the grill cloth. The badge is in good condition though, surprisingly. There's some knocks and dings on the aluminium strip there. It's a bit lumpy. It looks like someone's maybe tried to glue it on at one time and not made a very good job of it. Fuse holder's missing, that's no big deal. The silver centers out, the knobs are missing as well, but again, that's given its age. This is an earlier Dominator, and I can tell that because this one has the voltage selector on there, and they were removed sometime around 72, 73, so this will be an early 72. And I have actually got another one of these which I've been using for gigging for quite some time, for quite a few years, 4 years or so. But in fact I've got two that I use for gigging, but I've got one's a later one, and the one with the voltage selector is the earlier one. So let's get this chassis out of the cabinet and we can have a look at what we're dealing with. Right, so here we go. Just have a look. We've got the usual airy capacitor again there that we've had in all the others, with a rather attractively yellow capacitor on the board there, and we need to see if there's a date on that. So the mustard caps are in again, but we don't, and the Weimars on the tone stack there we've got as usual, and the coupling caps, and then we've got some other coupling caps here. These green ones, these were in the very early ones as well. What else then? So everything else looks a bit much the same really. Now there's a couple of Mullard ECC83s in this, which you can see there, which is rather tasty. So there's those, and there is I think that, whether that's a Mullard as well, you know, I don't know what that is, can't really see, but anyway, we've got some decent preamp tubes. The output tubes, which have rolled under here, are pretty nondescript. You can get those out. There's one, I'm not sure what they are. They've got an S on them, so anybody knows what that is, I'd be really grateful if they could tell me what brand they think that EL84 is. So we're going to test these, see if they're any good, but these aren't going in it. Here we go again. So this time this one is going to be slightly different, as I can't really call this volume 3 if I'm just going to do this exactly the same as I did the other one. So what we're going to do on this one, we've got some more Russian tubes to go in this one, in the output stage that is, and I'm going to mod one of these channels so they're not the same. It seems a bit pointless to have these channels the same. The ones I use for gigging, the channels have been paralleled up, and how that was done, and I'll put a link to it, a video for the guy Nick Evans. Sadly he passed away 2 or 3 years ago, but his channel is still up and live. His family left it up just in his memory, and in the hope that those videos would be really helpful, and they are. He was a really good tech, and he's done this mod where he does basically each of these channels goes into the phase inverter on one side of an ECC83 12AX7, and what he does in this mod is he disconnects this is the phase inverter. He disconnects one side and puts the grid to ground so it's not humming, and then what you do is you put the other channel through the same side, through the side that's got channel 1. So say channel 2 then connects with channel 1, and it works really well, because obviously then you can turn up both channels and get a bit more grunt out of it. But I thought it would be a good idea to mod one of these channels to make it different, because they are identical. So that's what we're going to do with this one as well. So the output tubes we're going to use on these are 6P15P. Now the only mod we'll need to make on those, apart from the obviously biasing them, is that the grid 3 is not internally connected on them. So we have to connect that to I think it's pin 6 to cathode. So we're going to put those tubes in. They will stand the voltage. They have a rate of 300 volts on the plate and the screen. And what I'm doing in these Wem Dominator series, really, for people who've got these type of 15 watt amps, you know, we're looking to utilize really good Russian tubes that are really not that well known, in place of more expensive EL84s. If you can get a pair of tubes for a tenner that are brilliant and work really well, why go out and pay 30, 40, even £50 for a set? There's just no point. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to use these tubes. I've got plenty of them, and if, you know, when I've done all these projects, I hope that helps people to say, yeah, I can do that to my amp. I'm going to order some of those. They may cost you a little more than they've cost me, because I bought mine a long time ago, but even so, you'll get them loads cheaper than you'll get EL84s. And yeah, if you're planning on keeping your amp for a long time and you get 4 or 5 sets of them, well, they'll last you forever. End of problem. So you could probably get 4 or 5 sets of those for the price of a set of EL84s. Right, we're going to crack on. We're going to do a turns ratio test again on the transformer, because I want to see how close that is. I want to see how accurate they did these transformers over time. So all I'm doing really while I'm doing this, I'm just documenting more information about things. So we found some discrepancies between the first transformer and the second, so I'm going to, and you can see that it's quite a beast of a transformer. These had really big transformers on for a 15 watt amp. That's quite sizable. So these are good transformers. The only problem is they only have one tapping on them for the secondary, and it usually swings around 12 to 16 ohms, depending on where you've set your effective load resistance with your plate voltage and so on. Right, we've got the board out, and very grubby. The whole amplifier needs a good clean, really, but other than that, and you can see there, so I've took the capacitors out, took the big one out, the airy one, and that, as usual, there's no date, but this one is October 1969. So I think this amp was made around 1970, I'm guessing, early 1970, this one. So it's one of the very early ones, because before they went from the Mark II to the Mark III. This will be a very early one indeed. So what are we going to change in this besides these capacitors? So I've been having a look. So I'm going to change the plate resistors. It's something I tend to do in amplifiers. Not everyone does it, and not everyone needs to do it really, but I have this thing about changing plate resistors, because at some time they could become noisy. While we've got this amplifier in bits like we have, it's another 15 minutes, 20 minutes to change them, really. Get them all changed, and then we know then that this amp's not going to have any frying problems like our Marshall, although that turned out not to be the plate resistors. But if you remember, we also had some on that Black Star Artisan 15. If anyone's watched that video, that one of the problems on that again was bad carbon comp plate resistors. So I'm going to remove these and put metal film in. And don't anybody give me any of that, oh, you're ruining the mojo, because it just isn't. As I've said before, I've done some of these, and the best sounding ones have always been when I've used metal film. In fact, we did a Dominator 25, and I'll have to post some pictures up on community, because I had to strip every single part out of that. Someone had sprayed it with oil, and obviously it's been left over time. What a mess. And I stripped every component out of that and cleaned it all up, and they all metal film went in there, and that's the best sounding Dominator of any of them that's come over my bench. A friend of mine owns that now, and he just sounds amazing. It's got a Celestian greenback in it, So the Dominator 25 was the model that came after this. It's still 15 watts. I don't know why they call them Dominator 25, because it's still a 15 watt amp. It's the same. It's the green board, the later board that was in the Mark 3s as well. But that just sounds astonishingly brilliant. So we're going to change the plate resistors, and we're also going to change some of these capacitors anyway, because we're going to mod one of these channels. So we're going to check, and I think these green ones are probably going to come out. I'm reluctant to take the mullards out though, the mustard caps, sorry. I'm reluctant to take those out because they, you know, we did have to take the big ones out, if you remember, on the last one, because there was leaking, one was leaking, and the Weimars were leaking, which was a bit of a shame. Well, one of them was, but we ended up changing them both. But hopefully they won't be on this one. Now I've tested the valves that came out of this as well. The one we couldn't tell whether it was a mullard is a mullard. I had a bit of a look at it, and they test really good. So I'm on a winner with that, because I've got 3 mullard preamp tubes to go in this. The tubes, the output tubes, well, they tested okay. They were around about 65%, 60-65%. When they've been in the tester a while, they made 70, so they're okay for a project. So I've got those, but main thing is I've got those preamp tubes, so that is a result. I'll just show you what I've done to this. We've not got this, we've not powered it up yet. We've changed the plate resistors. You can see there's a couple there been changed at 47 Ks. I've changed some coupling capacitors that were in there, these green ones, which are these ones here, which I've got rid of. What else have I changed? Just those. The bypass capacitors have been changed. Obviously that capacitor there has been changed, the electrolytic, and that one's been changed, and the diodes, and we've got a new drop-in resistor on there. These are the tubes, you can see 6P 15P. So we're all ready now to fire this amp up. So we're going to bring it up on the Variac and see what happens. So we've got 1 meter on the left. This is monitoring the bias. I've got a 200 ohm resistor tacked in, 5 watt 200 ohm is tacked in there, and we are ready to go. So we've got some voltage on there, 114. So we've got 149 volts on there at the moment. 93 volts on the Variac. And we're drawing 157 milliamps, and that of course includes the Variac, so nothing. So no shorts. You can see the pilot lights glowing now. So we've got 150 volts on the Variac, and we're just going to let that settle. And I can hear sound. There's some crackling. So those sockets look like they need a bit of a clean. Yeah, but I just need a nut on there, which is why that's reacting the way it is. Settled down nicely. We'll just let those caps sit for a minute. So we're just taking it up some more, and now I've got 170 volts, and this thing is coming alive. So I'm going to mod this after I've got it running, because I don't, or else I'm going to be chasing my tail. One thing having modding an amp, but when you've got a fault and you're trying to mod it at the same time, so I want to make sure both channels run first, and then I'm going to whip this board out again. I've got to take it out anyway to put the cathode resistor back in. Then we're just going to do those few mods, and we're going to have a look at the schematic for this amp as well, because this is the third one we've done and we've still not looked at the schematic, have we? Right, up we go now. Now I've started up, this amp had a 100 ohm resistor in it, and I've now got a 200 ohm in this, so I've started off with that. If you look at the meter on the left, the bias is 9.8, 9.9, and climbing up to 10 volts now. And we've got 323 on that plate. I'm now going to do the bias quickly, because we may be too hot, we may not. And looking at that going up, something's not right, is it? And I think they're red plating, you know. So as you can see on there, the bias voltage has come down quite a bit. We've now got an 82 ohm resistor in there. One of the tubes that was in blew and was arcing over inside. According to the data sheet on these, they should take 300 volts on the plate and on the screen. That is the Russian data sheet as well for these tubes. That's the screen voltage you're looking at now, that's 285, so we're 15 volts under. The plate voltage, however, is 315, which is 15 volts over, which isn't a lot. They're biased at 12.6 watts now, taking 5% off for the screen, so they're a little bit over, but that shouldn't be a problem, and probably more comfortable with them being over, because it keeps the voltage down on the screens and the plate. So far those are holding up. We may not get away with these tubes. I've read various things on the internet where people say these will only take 200 volts on the screen, so we'll just have to wait and see. But we have got that running at the moment. Okay, I'm just looking at that again, you know, and that looks to me like that's running away with it, doesn't it? And I think it is. Yeah, look at the voltage coming down. So no, these tubes aren't going to do it. That's running away. It's just too much for them. So what does that tell us then? That tells us that that the data sheet is twaddle on these tubes, and that they won't take 300 volts on the screens and the plate. Absolute twaddle. So they aren't going to work. They are not going to work, but we've tried them, and that's the main thing. 2 for the bin, but we've tried them, and that's it's all trial and error. We did work to the data sheet on those, and those didn't work, so it's back to the drawing board. Right, so I thought we'd have a bit of playtime with these tubes, these 6P15Ps. I've put that set back in, and they're running okay. And I've been experimenting with the variac, applying the voltage to them. So we're running at about normal on the variac now, which is about 238 volts, which is roughly what our mains is. And that gives us 287 on the screens now with these, and they'll start to run away. So what I've been doing is backing off the variac to a point where they don't run away. You can see now the voltage is just creeping up on the bias. Look there, it's just gone above 7 volts, and we've got 285 there on that screen. And they'll hold for a while, and then they'll begin to get the screens, I would imagine, get hot, and then they begin to run away. And I've actually been doing a bit of reading on the internet, and it is one of the symptoms of these tubes if you get too much screen voltage on them. So I thought, seeing as we're not going to use this set of tubes in anything now, really, they're just a test set, I thought we might as well have a bit of fun and do some experimenting, and just to see if we can stabilise these tubes at any point. So now if you look at the bias meter on the left, you can see that it's beginning to run away now. gradually creeping up. And you can see the screen voltage on the right is gradually coming down. So let's start. What I'm going to do now, that's beginning to crawl and it's getting faster now, and you can see it's going. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to drop the variac down. I'm going to drop the screen voltage down to 260 volts. Now you can see now the screen, the bias voltage is dropping. Well, of course, the plate voltage is dropping because we're doing this on the variac, so we're only, at the moment, we're only working off the screen voltage for this. And you can see that's now, and if we drop that down, so let's drop that down to 250 now. And you can see that voltage keeps creeping back above 250. And that's because that screen must be cooling down on that tube now as we're not driving it so hard. Obviously this is running at idle, so of course there's no guitar blasting away through it, so we'd have to compensate for that. But that seems to be sitting quite comfortable at that. So why am I doing this? Well, just to get an idea really of where we could run these tubes, not necessarily in this amp either, but you know, in other amplifiers. It just gives me an idea of how far I can push these tubes. And really at 200, you know, below sort of 260, 265 volts, they're already beginning to stabilize. They're pretty stable now. But yeah, I think we're about stable now with that. You can see it's just sat at 5.73, 7273 there, and we've got 250.8 volts on the screen. So that screen seems to run happily at that 250 volts. So that data sheet 6P15P must be for the EV tube, which is the military spec. Although it doesn't say so on the tube data sheet, but that must be the case, I would have thought. So that's running pretty nicely now. Let's just see what's on the plate. Won't be much more. $270 volts on the plate now on those. So what current are they drawing now? 5.7 divided by 82. So divide by 2. So the tubes are drawing 34 milliamps each now. We take away 5% for the screens. So 33 milliamps times 270. So they're running at 8.9 watts. So assuming we got an amplifier that was probably had an HT, I don't know, somewhere around 275, we could probably balance those tubes up quite comfortable. We just have a little bit too much, I think, to run those tubes. But I thought, while I've got this on the bench and we're working on it anyway, we've got these tubes, thought it'd be good just to do a bit of experimenting with these tubes. Just for the entertainment value really, as some people are interested in this kind of thing. But we shall see, we shall push on, and I might do a bit more experimenting. I've got this amp running on these tubes. Yeah, you won't believe it, but I have. And look at the screen voltage, 225 volt. I'll show you what I've done. I've added two 10k screen resistors. Just turn that down. Now also, I made a bit of a boo-boo on the last Dominator, and I didn't realise until I was doing this one, and all of a sudden, I don't know why, it just came to me. So I put screen resistors on that Dominator, those 6 on the last Dominator, those 6p 18p's, pin 6 is no connection. So of course I just wired it from pin 6 over to pin 9. I tried the EL84s in it before I put the screen resistors on, and then of course I realised that pin 6 on an EL84 is an internal connection, which means you can't use it as a spare pin. So a bit of a boo-boo. Not a problem while the 6p 18p tubes are in there, but if somebody puts some EL84s in there, there'll be a problem. So I've got to change that. It just came to me when I was looking at doing this, and then I thought, hang on a minute, what did I do with the last one? So what I've done with this one, and I'll probably get the other camera so we can get in close to see how close we can get in with this one. So if we get in there, so if we look what I've done here, we get in, I've put a tag strip in the middle of the tubes, and let me see if I can find a pointer, because that is switched on, so I don't want to be probing in there with my fingers. So let's have a look then. So I've got two 10k resistors, and I've got one up and one down because they were a bit close together and I didn't want them touching. I've had to rewire it slightly as well, because they took the feed to the board, to this next node here, from the grid on the tube, from the screen on the tube, sorry, from pin 9. So what I've done is I've separated those, and I've then brought a wire from here down to the next stage, node 3 that would be. So I've wired these up individually, these 10Ks, as I said, one top, one below, and then I've insulated these wires going in here, they're straight to the pins. And what I've done with the feed side, I've put a piece of 18 WG wire on there, and what that's done is firm those pins up so they can't push down, and that has worked a treat. And then I've put the wires through the grommets where these previous wires are here. You can just about see the grommets there. So I've just put the wires through there, and that's worked out really well. So just pull that back. So I've now got this off the Variac and straight into the mains, and you can see now that these tubes are warming up. You see the bias is really stable. 224 volts we've got on there. Now there's mixed opinion about these tubes online, and I've been doing a lot of reading. So some people say they're only good for 200 volts on the screen, and some data is saying 250 volts on the screen. So I've got that at 224, so we're only 24 volts over. I think we're going to be all right with these. These tubes are supposed to sound really good as well, from what people have actually said, although to be fair, most of that they've been put in hi-fi. So we're going to see now if these tubes will hold up or whether they'll run away. We've got a 60 ohms bias resistor in, and I've actually had to make that up with two watt 120s in parallel to get 60. And we've got this at 12.4 watts at the minute. Now, as I said, it may not, you know, it's held up so far. All afternoon I've been experimenting with this, got some daft like that, and they've held up really well. I'm just watching these now and just seeing if they'll hold up. I think they will, because they're pretty close to the tolerance. 300 volts is the plate, 316 volts. If I measure it off the anodes, the plates on the transformer, which I can there, it's still 316 volts, because check that. So I just keep using it from that point. which feeds the transformer from the centre tap. There's no difference between centre tap and the plates on this transformer. Don't know why. There's normally about 4 volts difference, but it's not on this one. And you can see there I'm only 15 volts over, 15.5 volts over. So we're not really stressing these tubes out now at all, really. You know, you could quite easily see that. I mean, they're running at the limit, no doubt about it. But so what did these tubes cost me? Well, I bought 20 of these and they work out at £1.35 each. And there was one dud in it, the one that arced over, which had obviously short. And funny, when I tested them on the meter before I put them in, and it came up short, and then I looked again and it weren't short, and I thought, I went off there. And then, so obviously that was intermittent inside, and you get that. Some tubes, they just, you know, it measured a short on it and it was arcing. And eventually that showed up on there and it was arcing inside. These two have been great. We have, I mean, bearing in mind we overheated the screens a couple of times on them. So well, this is all experimental. And that's the only way you find out whether these tubes are going to work. It's just experimental, and it's good entertainment, really, watching me frying tubes at my tube stash. So these two tubes they've held up pretty well, and you can see that's really stable now. It's chod on. So I'm just going to check the bias again. So we have got 4.92. We divide that by our 60 ohms. And that's 82 milliamps. We divide that by 2, that leaves us 41. We take away 5% for the screen, that leaves us 38 milliamps. So they're not exactly roasting, well, 38.95. So if we times that by 312, that gives us 12.1 watts. I don't know how I do it. So there we go, balance those up perfectly. So there's always a way, you've just got to find it. I'm sure there's people out there who are going, shouldn't have done that. But they're working. I think 1 or 2 of these mullards, yes. Yeah, they're a bit zingy, aren't they? But I think they'll be okay when they're in it. Most of them that are in these are a bit zingy. Now then, I've got some other tubes. Here we go again. These are 6P43Ps, and I'm going to try setting here. So also I've had a new addition to my testing equipment. So Pink came in earlier when those tubes were running them at the limit, well, over the limit, and they were running away. And Pink came in here and she was meowing, let's just say rapidly, and you can always tell it's a very, usually if I'm using the test meter and the bleeps are really high, I get that same meow. And the reason she was doing that is while those tubes were running away, they got some high frequency oscillation on them, and Pink can hear that and we obviously can't. So now Pink is actually sat behind me and I've got this amp running flat out with all the controls full up, and it's not bothering her one iota. So yes, so we now know this has got no high frequency oscillation because Pink's passed it personally. There we go. You just see that, and just forget to focus because it's not easy with these to get. It's only getting it to focus, but it's been able to see the print on them. So 6, that N means P, 6P43P E. These are 1976, the other one's 1975. These are from the reflector factory, I think. So the other one's already in. Right, so out of the wall and back on the variac. Put a 360 ohm resistor in with these because I've got a feeling these draw a lot more current. So let's see where we are with those. These are the same spec as those 6P18Ps actually. And you can see with a 360 ohm resistor in there, look, 290 and dropping. Where on the others, about 318, I think, something like that. So they're drawing a lot of current. We're just going to get the calculator and find out just how much they're drawing. 12.3 watts it says. There we go then. So look how they perform. 31 volts drop across that resistor, which is quite high. So how much is on that screen? Let's have a look. 254 on that screen. And these are 300 volts anode plate, whichever you want to call it, and 250 volts on the screen. So they're balanced absolutely perfect, aren't they? Something's giving off some heat. Ow, yeah, the cathode resistor's baking. Just pick that up, there's no surprise. So I think that'll need to be 10 watts with these tubes. And they don't really seem to be kicking out as much gain either. My word, those tubes are drawing some current. And this is what I mean about tubes. You know, when you're putting tubes into amplifiers, even cathode biased, you know, these tubes, exactly the same pin out as an EL84. But if you put these into this amp with an 100 ohm resistor, this thing would be a light. You know, they're at 12 watts with a 360 ohm resistor, and an EL84 is at 12 watts with an 100 ohm resistor. So they would be really biased high, probably somewhere 15-16 watts. They'd be cooking. And that's what you got to watch with some Russian tubes. With the other set of Russian tubes, we got the same dissipation, but we'd only got a 60 ohm resistor in there, because they're not drawing nearly the amount of current that these are. I think what I can smell is that cathode resistor. I put it on a plastic bag for insulation, the previous one, because it weren't draw, obviously it were cold, it weren't drawing much current, but now it is, and it's beginning to melt the bag. Right, so I've just put a 390 ohm 10 watt resistor in there now. So I've doubled it. Well, I've doubled the wattage, and it's a little bit, it should drop the bias down slightly as well. Whether we can ill afford that, I think we certainly can for the anode. 288 volts, and that's now 390 ohms. So they're drawing extra current, and it's all going through that resistor, which is 10 watts, and that's quite warm as well, even though we've doubled it. So what we're going to do now is just see what those come out at. 11.61 they're running at. So tubes are running comfortable at that. Again, we're running these tubes close to the limit. We're just 6 volts over on that plate, sorry, on that screen, and we're under on the plate. So I'm not going to use these tubes in this amp though. I'm going to use the others, but I just wanted to try these. Right, got the 6P15Ps back in now, and the background noise on this amp is loads louder. Don't know why that would be. Must be something to do with the moo of those tubes or something. What they're dishing out. These are dishing out a bit more. And these are the tubes that we're going to use in this amp, I've decided. Although those others would be fine in there. And I don't think we need to worry with the other tubes. It wouldn't be a case of wondering whether they were going to last, because they're well under. Well, the screen was on the ball and the plate voltage was lower, so I think they'd have been fine in there. But I'm going to put these in. We can always change back at any time if we wish. I've got all the data and for this amp, so I know what resistors to swap. I'm getting a bit of an anorak, you know. All this is, you know, the reason I'm doing all this is if people out there have got these tubes or are looking to buy some of these tubes, and if you've got as many as I have, then it's worth doing all this to find out how usable they are. Right, so here we've got the schematic. So let's have a look at a bit of a strange schematic, but yeah, it's pretty clear to follow. This one's on the internet, by the way. You can find this in quite a few places online. If you search for it, Wem Dominator MK3 schematic, if you want to download one for yourselves, just have a look. So this area, which is the output tubes, and this is the phase inverter, we're not touching any of that. So we have got, and it's the channel with the bright switch, which is this channel. These channels are identical. So if we're working from here going into there, so it's this section here we're going to alter, and we're going to try and make these channels so they're not, obviously not the same. We've got 1.5k, 820 ohms that's going to be, and it's going to have a 680 nanofarad cap. That's going to be 22k instead of 56. And then if we move on to this 1.5k here, we're going to drop that to 5k. So this is something I'm going to try. I'm going to drop that to 5k, but we're going to put 1 microfarad on there. We're going to remove this bright switch altogether. That's going. And the heel for the bright switch is going to be a master volume. And I've bought a dual gang pot, and I'm going to install that just here, going into the sorry, not there. Yeah, sorry, I'm going to install that here and here. So you can just see those 2 marks. That's where I'm going to fasten in the master volume. We may have to change some of those components again, because it may well sound crap when I've done it. You know what I'm like. So everything's trial and error, but I've got a rough idea in my head. At least this section I know should sound okay. The first stage, it's just when we get onto this second stage, and again we're going to get more gain out of this amp because we haven't got a cathode bypass capacitor on that resistor there, so that's going to give us some more gain. Plus we're lowering the resistor, which will give us a bit more gain. So we're going to make this a bit more gainy, and we're just going to leave the other one as it is. Again, putting a 1 microfarad on there will give us a little bit more gain as well. So we're not going to have a massive amount of gain. It's not going to be a gain monster, but it'll have a fair bit of gain on that. So we just scroll back out again. So now you can see the schematic in full. So you can see the 2 stages on each channel there. You can see the tone stacks on there. We could change the tone stacks slightly, but if you look in most amps, they're much of a muchness. You know, this might be put 47 nanofarad instead of 33, but it's minimal. So this might be 250 instead of 220. It's not going to make that much difference. So you can see there's the second stages there of each one. You can see there, and so on. The bright switch, which is going. Then you can see the phase inverter there, and so on. So you can see the whole layout of the amp there. Right, we've got this Dominator running. We've done the mods on the other channel, and here's the master volume that I've added, and it's a double gang pot, and we've added it. Let me show you where we've added it. I'm going, sorry about that. We've added it after the coupling caps on the phase inverter going into the output tubes, but before the grid stoppers. So it's in between the coupling caps and the grid stoppers, and obviously there's one on each side, so it's a double gang pot. Right, that's it. We're all completed. We've added a fuse, HT fuse, because we didn't have one of those, and secured this mains cable underneath because it just had a knot in it previously, and the knot had come out, and it was just, you could just pull it out. So I've got made a secure a bracket to go across that and clamp it. So he's sorted out. Now then, check out these knobs. So we decided we'd have some let's put a bit more light on it. I decided we'd have some different knobs on this because, for a start, the centres were missing out a lot of them, and of course we were one short once we'd put this master volume in. So as it happened, I got 8 of these. I think these are off a Yamaha bass amp. So yeah, check those out. Those are really good. So a bit different. because there's no way I could have matched the other knobs in, and I didn't want it just to have an odd one on, and I thought, well, that looks really nice with those on. Right, next thing is to do is we need to find a speaker to go into that cabinet to get this up and running, because this came with a blown speaker. So I've got this Wem back in its cabinet, and we're going to have a listen. I put a Carlsberg Powertone speaker in it, and I didn't like that at all, so I've taken that out and I've put a Celestion in there. So let's have a listen. So this channel, which is the channel that we've modded, so we're going to have a listen to that now. Bring the master full up. Now this channel is much more aggressive than the original channel. This channel we've not modded at all. It's still the same. Now if I go into this channel, virtually the same. Let's just drop that on there, somewhere around there. And the bass. Go on to this one. So you can see this channel's much more aggressive than the original one, and we've not changed that much in it really. So we changed the 1.5k bias resistor on the first stage. We changed that to 820, and then we put a 1 microfarad coupling cap on there. It didn't have this channel doesn't have a coupling cap on the first stage. And then the second stage we dropped the 1.5k bias resistor to 6.8k. That's on the preamp bells I'm talking about. And then we left that 100 nanofarad capacitor in there. I did have a 1 microfarad on there as well, but it was a bit too faulty, so I took that off and put it back to its original 100 nanofarad. So let's have a look at the other end of the scope then on this. So the amount of distortion that we can get from this now, it's pretty good. And again, it's a much more harder, aggressive sound. The other channel, that overdrives quite well. It's a bit of a softer sound. So now if we max the other one out and have a listen to that. Take a bit of bass on. Sure, if you experimented with different speakers, you could, get a really good sound out of this amp, or the sound that you prefer. Remember, it's the speaker that probably makes the most difference. So let's drop that down to about number 8. That didn't make a lot of difference, did it? So let's drop this channel down to about number 7. So let's hone him down there and go back. The other problem with that 1 microfarad capacitor that I had on the second stage, there's a coupling cap, that you could never get the amp clean on this first channel, on this modded channel. The 6.8k bias resistor that I added on the second stage of this channel, I wish I hadn't put a 10k in there. Now it might have just been a bit softer. So even that now is turned down quite low. You can see it with this guitar. I just put it on single coils. You see that's a very, very aggressive channel. Treble off there. So if we put into the other channel, yeah. See, that's clean. We go into there. If you really lean on it, it's just beginning to clip. If I put that in humbucker, we go into that one. You can see much cleaner and not quite as much volume coming out of there, not as much punch. So let's go about half and half. So we've got 5 on there, 5 on there, probably go 4 on there. It's a bit loud. See, that's a really hard driving channel, but that's fine because if you used an ABY pedal in this, you can get the best of both worlds. But this channel is really designed to drive and does work. It works best when it's cranked. the channel. So that more or less concludes the demo of this amp, and this amp was in a bit of a state when it came in. A lot of the screws were missing on the back. It said all new screws in and new chrome washers around there. It said quite a lot of work done to it, but this amp is smoking. You know, there's a personal, you've got a choice of two sounds really going on there. For someone who likes a more aggressive channel, you've got this one. You know, a bit softer and not quite so aggressive, you've got this one. And of course, having this master volume has just made this amp so much more versatile. I have to say, I've never been a lover of master volumes, but the way I've done this one with a 2-gang pot is excellent. And we got rid of that bright switch because we didn't really need that. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all the people that are subscribing to the channel, and you all take care, and I'll see you all in another video. Bye bye for now.